Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interview David Schnurman, CEO of Lawline and author of 11 Suitcases, whose courage to uproot his family and move to Barcelona transformed not just his life, but his vision of what's possible when you dare to steer your ship in a new direction. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host, and I'm really excited today to have on David Schnurman. He is the CEO of Lawline. He also just has a new book that's just dropped, just released and launched, 11 Suitcases. Really want to learn more about that, what that book is about, and why David has 11 suitcases. How are you doing today, David?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to having a great conversation with you.
You know, as a future published author myself, I'm very excited to see, the reception that you've gotten with 11 Suitcases. What is that about? Like, if you can give like a very high level, just thumbnail of what
Yeah.
it's about.
So in 2019, I moved with my family to Barcelona for 2 years, and we packed 11 suitcases and all of our things on the plane. And it's a story of why we went, what happened while we were there, and then how we transformed as a result. It's a memoir written in present tense. And the goal is to inspire other people that it's never too late to take a leap in their life, to make a change in some form, especially when you're parents, especially when you're in midlife, which we were, and you feel like you're stuck on the course. And so that's why I wrote the book. But of course, I wrote the book. You could see the photo is a photo with us and our luggage that was actually taken at the airport. And then in the background is the view from our house, our apartment in Barcelona. I wrote it for my kids so they can memorialize this amazing experience that they had together.
That's awesome. I mean, multiple levels. And I can see why there was more than enough for a book out of it, because I mean, the story of family together is what strikes me first. Yeah, taking a leap and how to do that, like all of those things, which we won't get into right now, but I wanted to let everyone know about that.
That's why it's up there, so you can be thinking about it while we talk.
Yeah. On Amazon?
It's on Amazon and 11suitcases.com.
And I just saw you recently, like in New York City. I think it was November.
Yep.
So not, it's been a few months, but it was at the Legal Innovators Conference in New York City, and I saw you and I saw Ari. Yeah, I hadn't seen you in person. We had done a podcast, but
yeah, you were on my podcast, Lawyers Who Learn, and it was an amazing interview. And I'd followed you for years online. So I love that you can use podcasts to grow relationships. And I highly recommend anybody who's listening, if it's not a podcast, do something to virtually connect with other people. But a podcast forces you to do it like in a public way.
Yeah, it does. It's a good excuse. And I also got a signed
yes,
version
my first book.
David's other book, Fast Forward Mindset. So,
which, by the way, it's not a coincidence. I published that book in 2019, and then, 9 months later, I moved to Barcelona. So it was a direct connection to being more fearless and focused in your life, to get out of your comfort zone, to eating my own dog food, and using that framework to move to another country. So
interesting. Okay, audience, you need to buy this one first. And then buy the next one.
You don't have to, but it's certainly that I consider that one like personal and business, and this one's personal and family. They're interconnected, but that's sort of how I think about it.
So right now you're in Brooklyn, right?
Correct. Okay. Yeah, I'm in Brooklyn. Yeah.
So as the audience knows, I like to get into people's business and ask them about their childhood and origin story and all that. And so we gave you a little teaser there. We're going to go talk more about the book and everything with David later. But right now, did you grow up in Brooklyn?
I grew up 5 blocks from where I live today. I'm in Park Slope, Brooklyn. It's also known as like Brownstone, Brooklyn. It's called Park Slope because there's Prospect Park here that was built by the same developer and designer as Central Park. It's a 5K circumference. So that's when I first moved back here, I should say, because I lived here, I started running the park for the first time. And that's when I started running marathons. But my wife is from Miami, never lived in Brooklyn, but she lived in the city. And it took me 2 years to convince her to move to Brooklyn when we had kids. She reluctantly came. And within 6 months, she said, it has beyond met my expectations because it's a neighborhood. The city is nice, but it's so it's hard to have your own sort of neighborhood and feel.
Yeah, and having, been to Brooklyn a few times, it's gotten a lot nicer. Like I mean, as an outsider, like many more
Right.
shops and a lot more, it's become a little more vibrant from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think anything in the past 20 years, right, has the development all over the country. Or like Miami is a good example too. But yes, Brooklyn, like it was a great neighborhood in the 80s, just a lot more muggings. But not like crazy, just like getting your hat stolen or your jewelry, whatever. And it was still what they call like a yuppie, ish neighborhood.
Yeah,
But it's opened up to the world. There's such a strong international community who lives here now. So my book is about being an expat in Barcelona. There's,
right.
I'd say 30% of the people that we know are expats living here. So it was cool for me to step into their shoes of what it's like to be an expat.
100%. So going back to Lil David, growing up in Brooklyn, what was your neighborhood like? Like, was there a corner store? Like, who did you see? Like, did you play
Yeah,
around there? Like, what was that like?
it was quintessential. It wasn't Brooklyn in the 60s where you think about, but it was pretty close to it. We There's not the internet. We would literally go out and play kick the can, where you like sort of somebody kicks a can, everybody hides in a stoop, and you got to find them. We'd play on the streets, we'd play on the sidewalks. The house I grew up on, the sidewalk was very wide. It used to be the entrance to the park, and in the park there used to be a mansion for somebody very rich back in the days. And so our street was Third Street, so it's just the widest street in the block. So we would always be playing. We played go-karts. We'd make our own cars and we'd race. It's called Park Slope because from where we were on the top of the slope, it's about a mile down. So like it's pretty cool. So we would always be playing outside. It doesn't exist, honestly. Like I knew all our neighbors and all of our kids did. And all the kids came together. Today, I love my neighborhood. I love my block, but I don't know my neighbors in the same way. And maybe it's internet, maybe it's different times. The kids are more busy now, but it is something has changed. It's a little different than in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, you were still able to experience the feral childhood that
you
doesn't exist anymore.
you leave your house and your parents don't know where you are until you call them.
So about your parents, like big family, what did your mom and dad do? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So I have an older sister who's about 2.5 years older. She works with me at Lawline. She's been working there for the past 17 years. So great relationship. My parents, my dad's mother immigrated from Russia when she was 9 years old by herself. When he was 7 years old, his father died. So he grew up, and his older siblings were much older. So he grew up with no money, in that kind of neighborhood, and ended up driving a taxi through law school. So that's where my connection to law started. My mom grew up in a religious family, Orthodox family in Borough Park, Brooklyn, which is a very religious area. But for some reason, like she just didn't like sort of how she felt women were treated in that area. And so when she was in her teenage years, she rebelled a little bit and ended up meeting my dad and getting married and building a great family. She was a teacher for about 15, 20 years. Then we were born. And then in her second career, she worked with my dad. Lawline was actually a public access TV show since 1985, before it was an online CLE provider. And so that was the origin story of Lawline, which is a whole nother story in itself. So that she was the producer of the show. My dad was the host.
Wow. So your parents started Lawline.
They started the first version of Lawline. Yeah.
You said your mom was a teacher. What was she teaching at the time?
Fifth grade, sixth grade in public school. It was a very tough, because I used to visit her in school and the kids, it was really tough. She really didn't like the public school system in Brooklyn. And actually her experience being a public school teacher, for better or for worse, is what made our parents sent me and my sister to private school, because she had such bad sort of experience in her what she did, and that's obviously shaped the course of our lives in different ways as well. But yeah, so it was just fifth or sixth grade, depending on the year.
As far as siblings, it's you and your sister, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of interesting, like that your parents working on Law Line 1.0 together, and then you're working with your sister on it. Seems like it's been a family business for a while.
One of the things, my dad had estranged relationships with his siblings for different reasons. They always instilled in us from the beginning that we have to be like, our relationship is the most important thing for different reasons. And so over the years, like whether subconsciously or consciously, they kept pushing that relationship. My sister she was the straight A student. I was like the B minus. And she's an attorney. She worked for the Department of HUD in DC for a while. And then she came to New York, and she then worked at my dad's personal injury firm. My dad ended up sort of retiring. They were shutting down the firm, and she didn't know what, she was a little bit nervous. And she actually has a book coming out in 2 months as well. And she talks about this. And he said, you should go with David. That's where the future is. We were just getting started. And they to give you just a bit, they tried to build a Sealy company in 1999. They dissolved it in 2001. So when I started in 2006, I was really starting from scratch. But I would hold in all the relationships and conversations I had, I said, "Oh, we've been around since 1999," and I won't shortchange that. That made a huge difference for accreditation, for credibility. So I don't know. It sounds small, but it was big. It was really big just to be able to say that and use the name. So a lot of that was help getting that started in the beginning years was definitely related to that.
Still want to talk about your family, but for the benefit of the audience to give a little more background. So Law Line, it offers CLEs, and it's also like a TV show. Like what?
Yeah, well, so it was a TV show for not anymore, but like so my dad, the best way to describe it, he was the first podcaster before podcasters were a thing. He was doing public access the same way we're doing this, but this didn't exist. And his whole thing was he thought that's how he would get business as an attorney, right? And it ended up being a completely different thing. He ended up getting credibility, right? And then he ended up knowing all the judges and all the different lawyers, and everybody wanted to be on his show. So that's the best way to describe it. He was the first podcast, but it was in a real studio for a public access station, and they paid for it, but it was great for his credibility.
And actually, I want to jump back a little bit to your dad. I mean, sounds like a lot of grit. You had mentioned that he was driving a taxi while he was going to law school. Like he was working through law school, and one thing I remember about taxi drivers in the city is like, in order to become one, you have to know where you're going, and it's not like today where you plug into your iPhone the directions and it tells you where to go, which a lot of drivers now, that's how they do it. And sometimes they take you in different directions where you're like, where are you taking me? But back in the day, if I understand correctly, to become a taxi driver, you had to like essentially memorize all of the routes, all the streets. And
it's unbelievable, right? Yeah.
It's crazy. Like,
yeah. I mean, look, I never actually had that specific conversation with him, but what he did say, he loved making conversations with people. So every time somebody come in the taxi, he would talk to them. And he was like, I learned so much. It was the best thing. Like he was just like so optimistic about it. And I think he was in night school, maybe, because New York Law School has both programs, but he never forgot because they gave a chance on him, right? Like he was the first in his family, not only to go to college, but then to go to law school. So it was, and he tells the story about like they graduated law school. He went out to lunch with his family. They treated him to lunch, and everybody left. He didn't have a penny in his pocket, and he had all these presents, and he couldn't even pay to get on the subway home. And he was too embarrassed to tell anybody, so he had to ask the person who worked at the train station to let him in. So that was sort of like his graduation from law school.
Wow.
So different from like, and that's why I'm so grateful. Like I grew up differently than him, but I did grow up. I think for better or worse, for him, being spoiled is the worst thing in the world. Like that's he might not say that, but that's how I grew up. That's what I got from him. That was sort of like the learning lessons because and the reason I assume he grew up with no money and he had to figure it out. And so he didn't want us to ever feel like anything was too easy, to some degree. Not that we had it hard at all, but I think that it did give a little bit of that grit I think they're trying to make. And I don't know. So that's just because you were talking about childhood. That's just always something that, and then when I met my wife, she's like, actually, what's wrong with being spoiled? Like in a good way, like you could spoil your children. That's okay. But like, doesn't mean they're not going to turn into something. Some people will, but it's okay to also extra spoil them. So there's like training from your parents and then retraining from your wife over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you on that. Well, at that point, like the next step is going to university, and you ended up going to George Washington University, and you majored in communications, which seems appropriate. What was that experience like? And was there anybody there that was like a mentor that kind of gave you an idea or direction that you pursued?
College was such a great time, for growth. I never thought I would be a fraternity person, but then all the people who I became friends with freshman year decided to join this one fraternity, and I just had to make a decision. Am I going to go with who I am, or am I going to stick with this friend group? And I decided to pledge. And of course, that turned out to be one of the best things to do for my college experience because I'm close with many of them today, and it just transformed. I ended up living with them and doing everything together, right? And so that's just, to me, that was a pivotal moment. I met my wife in college, junior year, and of course, love at first sight to some degree, and we've been together ever since. And I lived abroad in college, which many students do. I lived in Florence, and my wife lived in Sevilla, and I think that became the beginnings of my love for travel because it was the first time I really did something like that, which has also transformed me in my ability to want to see as much of the world as possible. And of course, was one of the main reasons why we moved to Barcelona, and the how that happened we can talk about later. And so that's all. That was interesting. And I would just say, like, the reason I chose communications was because I mean, maybe it's silly, but like there was no exam at the end. But what I didn't realize, there was a 50-page thesis. And I tend to procrastinate on things. And mine was, how does email help introverts? Whatever. But I waited till last week to write a 50-page thesis, did not sleep the entire week. But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, lots of coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 50 pages, man. That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. And there was no chat GPT.
Was there a professor, or like, was there a particular course that made an impression?
I'll tell you one course that really stood out to me to this day. It was about persuasion in advertising. And in the course, he showed us so many different images, and you can see in all these images were hidden phallic symbols, hidden women's body parts, and it's like hidden in plain sight. But the data was so conclusive that when you have phallic symbols and other things that were like not even so hidden, but like so there, the increase in conversions was so much higher, like because they did A/B testing. And so I started learning about all this, and it still exists today, especially, I'm sure. So like that was a really impactful thing because when you see them, but just to realize there's this whole underworld that exists of things that are happening that are making you make decisions in life that you don't realize.
Well, it also makes me think I need to update my landing pages.
Well, there's a great book called Persuasion that talks about what happens before the event persuasion. It talks there is some stuff on landing pages there. Robert Cialdini is the author. He's amazing books. I highly recommend him for all of his books.
Cool. I'll check it out. So you went to New York Law School, and when you went there, um, you know, the guests that I talked to that are lawyers, like there's one of two ways that end up going to law school. One is that they knew from when they were a kid or early on that they wanted to be a lawyer. And others are like, well, I got this degree and I wasn't sure what to do with it, so I went to law school because I needed to make a living. It sounds like you were in the former camp, right? With your dad having gone to law school, that that it seemed like a natural path, or how did it work out for you?
The exact opposite.
Okay.
So I graduated college in 1999, and my intention was within a year I'll be making $1 million in some sort of venture that I'm doing. 5 years later, I was on my third sales job, making a lot less than that. And I started getting nervous. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I had no idea how to start a business. And I started getting nervous that because I looked people 20 years older than me, they were on their 15th sales job. And I knew I didn't want to be hopping around sales jobs for my career.
Yeah.
And so I started to realize, like, you know what? Maybe I'm not fit to be an entrepreneur. Maybe that wasn't for me. And I ended up becoming a real estate broker as part of my career shifts, and studying for the real estate broker's exam. I loved it. And I just loved the learning process. And that's the first moment I'm like, you know what? Maybe I had it all wrong. And I was like, maybe I should go to law school and I'll be a lawyer for my career. It's not an entrepreneur, or it could be, right? Because you could be your own. But I was like, I just rather be professional and make an impact versus be in sales. So that's how this was 5 years after I graduated college is when I started thinking that it was the right move to switch.
After university, you went to work, and it sounds like you took it was a way of finding yourself and like what the path was going to be for yourself through that.
Yeah, I guess to some degree, it was like I was really good at interviewing. I was selling online advertising for like what the banner ads. But yeah, it was a good transition. I will say this: sales was the perfect sort of hard challenge to do post college. That dealing with rejection, dealing with how to sell, to persuade people, and to do all that has helped me in the rest of my career in so many ways. So I'm glad I went through that period.
One thing an idea that bubbles up in my head from you saying that is that sales, like one thing about sales, done a little bit, is just that the reality of it, talking to somebody and where they're at and whether or not it's going to work or not, it's right there. It's like, it's the truth. Like, it's either you can sense from it what works, what doesn't work, and it's all like based on human reaction. And it's not like there's some easy formula that's going to guarantee that it works. You have to have that sense of the other person's, humanity and like where they're at. And the reason why I say that is because another thing that you do has a very similar thing to it in my mind as a lay person without the same experience. You do some comedy, right?
That was a one-time thing, which I want to do more, but so I ended up doing a stand-up routine.
Yeah.
And it's on YouTube, and I'd love to put it in the show notes. I'm very proud of it. I worked with a coach and she was coaching 7 of us for 3 months, do that 12-minute bit. And every minute that you write is about an hour and a half of writing for that 1 minute of talking. And we practiced and did it. And I did it because I had the opportunity to be coached for free for this organization I'm part of. They were offering to the first 7 people who did it. And I loved public speaking. And I actually had a knack. Because it was when I was doing it, I had my prepared thing, but I also sort of ad-libbed when I was up there when it felt right. And if I can make a career doing that, if I had the energy, I do a lot of things, and you got to pick and choose. So maybe that's next. But people were saying to me, you should pursue this more when you have time. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I find it interesting because the comedy, like, it's like that. Like, either people react to it or they don't react to it, and that's why you go through like the hour, like you said, of stuff to find the minutes of material that's going to work. And also, obviously, back to like the public speaking that you do. connecting with people. It's all about people, right? And how we are and how we react and what works and what doesn't. And it's different in some ways than, you know, than logic and legal analysis that can get pretty technical.
What I love uncovering is somebody's story. Whether we're on air, on a podcast, or just meeting in person, I just need to understand who they are and what makes them tick and be able to connect in that way. And when I can do that, and when somebody sees that I'm doing it and I really care, it just takes away a barrier or a wall that's usually there for conversation sometimes. And they can see I really am interested in who they are. And many times I try to uncover things that they don't tell even their closest friends sometimes. And this could be off the air because I just know like there's no linear path in life. So that's what excites me and energizes me. And we're all trying to figure out what we're doing here at the same time. So that's what I do. I'm definitely not the person who looks at Excel sheets and enjoys it. So I have to, but I'd rather be talking and hearing from people.
So one example of that, like moving forward in your career, True NYC.
Yep.
What was that? And like,
Yeah.
what was your experience with that? Because you founded that, so it was something that you created on
So
your own.
in a way, because I look at my son, he's done similar things. I was following my own DNA of what was interesting to me, what was weird, and just so it had nothing to. And I seen it. It was a public access TV show. Like my dad had started in 1985 for Lawline, but because this was in 2006, really before YouTube, it was the year YouTube was founded. I was interviewing entrepreneurs. One of the first people I interviewed was Simon Sinek to figure out how they started their business and grew it because I was trying to find that magic answer on how to start my own business. And this is before even I was involved and rebuilt Lawline from the ground up. And it's a direct connection to that show, to building Lawline, to who I am today. Almost, I can tell you at least 10 different things of what that led to, including me moving to Barcelona was directly connected to that show. Probably me speaking to you right now is directly connected. And that's why I restarted a year ago doing a podcast for lawyers who learn, because building relationships through these conversations and putting it out there leads to momentum in your lives and your guests' lives.
I totally agree with that. I mean, my experience of it is it's not linear. Like you're not doing something to get a particular result. It's actually, I think, better described as just a type of discovery, right? You're going on an adventure. You're talking to people, sharing experiences, and then you kind of learn from each other and what's possible.
Exactly.
I've enjoyed doing it, and I want to learn more about, Barcelona. Like, do you speak some Spanish now?
Like if you're like in kindergarten, we can probably have a decent conversation. But it's been 5 years since we moved back, and I was on a roll there. My son's fluent now, my older son, but I haven't really kept it up.
So 11 Suitcases is the story of your move to Barcelona with your family and taking that leap. It just came out a week ago, and so what is, I guess, what would you hope people learn from it?
What people learn, so there's two components. One,
Yeah.
I think it's a great story of seeing what we did. And the reason I wrote the book is when I moved to Barcelona, I was journaling and posting it on a blog publicly every day, and I'm putting it on social media, mostly to share it with family and friends. But quickly thereafter, it started going to people that I either just met in Barcelona or people I didn't even know. And one of the people who reached out to me was this guy, Joe Jacoby. He was a 1992 a kayak Olympic gold medalist. He did it in Barcelona, but he's from the US, and he ended up living there. He goes, "Can we go out to lunch?" I said, "Yeah." So we went out to lunch. He goes, "I've been reading your blog and I need to tell you something." Yes. And he goes, "When you're younger, it's like being on a kayak on a wide river. As you get older, that kayak goes into a canoe and then a ship and then a speedboat to eventually you're in a cargo ship on a narrow river. and you can't turn directions. And most people feel like they're stuck moving that course. He's like, but not you. You turned your ship. You move directions, and that's rare. And he said, you need to keep writing and sharing your story so other people know it's not impossible to move and turn their ships when they think they're stuck in that course. And within 2 months of that conversation, I told a group of friends, I'm going to turn this into a book. I thought it would be that year. Turns out 6 years later. But that was the beginning stages of why I knew I was going to put it out there and memorialize it from that on. And there's a lot of lessons in the book that we can get into, but that's why I wrote the book in the first place.
So when you were in Barcelona, I guess you were running your continuing business like from there, like you had the opportunity to do that remotely.
Yeah. So when I moved to Barcelona, only one other person in the company had moved to Ithaca before me. Besides that, we all worked from, God forbid, an office on Wall Street, right off Wall Street. And so it was not it was a big deal for me to be, the CEO of the business, to be leaving the country. So yeah, I was nervous about that, but you got to take a leap sometime. And that was our older kids were going from elementary to middle school. So that was the only time where I think it was possible. And so it was interesting because in the beginning, I had 2 lives there. I had the 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. life, and then the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. life, because that's when work started in the East Coast. And so I can't tell you how full my day, they were unbelievably full. I did so much. And I wasn't necessarily sitting in my computer for 8 hours a day either. So it ended up being a little challenging at some points. And in a weird sort of way, of course, after COVID happened, because it happened 7 months after we lived there, it became a little bit easier because we were all remote. And so before we had a conference room, I was the only person or 2 people on a TV, and now we were all on a Zoom meeting. So it became a lot easier to be on the same playing field as everybody else.
So I'm curious about Barcelona, like the selection of Barcelona, because you had been, you'd studied in Florence. Why Barcelona? Yeah. Like why'd you land there?
In 2015, we had 3 kids under 6. We got a book to help us raise our kids. And it told us to make core values, and you had to answer these questions. And one of them was, what makes you unique as a family? And we put together like eating healthy, sense of humor, being happy. And then at the end, I put travel. Like, we want to experience life through travel, because that was important to me and Kelly. It didn't mean anything when you have 3 kids under 6, but it was just something we put out there. And I started telling everybody about this. And then I eventually got connected to somebody who moved with his family to Barcelona for a year and had the most amazing experience. So it was from writing down this vision and telling people about it that led me to somebody who moved to Barcelona. He was in this organization called Entrepreneurs Organization. So I was a member of. And so that's how I ended up in Barcelona, because I wrote a vision. I told people about the vision. I connected with somebody who did that, and he gave me the sort of plug and play guide on how to do it.
Like if you do have a vision of something and you work towards it, you can make it happen.
Yeah, and to me, you have to write it down, right? Like, if you write something down, you can clearly communicate it, and you keep talking about it. It's The Secret. It's Think and Grow Rich. There's a million books about that, and there's a whole scientific reason behind it. But yeah, that's how that happened, and I'm grateful for that. And that's one of the things that I do share when I speak about this now, is the first thing you need to do if you're trying to figure out if you want to take a leap, turn your ship, is, especially if you're a family, sit around your kitchen table and figure out and write down what is unique about us, who we are, and put together that phrase or where you want to see yourself in 10 years from now. You don't need to have a family to do that, but write it down and tell it to people, because I could tell you almost everybody doesn't do that. And doing that there's a lot of data out there, right? In research, if you write something down, it is much more likely to happen.
I think it's a great way to bring your family together, like on a common, mission.
It was. And honestly, we did it out of struggle. The kids weren't listening to us. They weren't going to bed at the same time. We didn't feel respected. They felt disrespected, and they're 6, right? So we did it not out of like the desire to travel. We did it in the desire to get the kids to go to bed on time. That was our goal, right? And so, but I dug deep and I'm like, travel is it. So this was never in our blueprint. I live 5 blocks from where I grew up. I was never, right. It was never my blueprint to live abroad ever. Yeah. And so I wrote a book because I am still like, I can't believe that is what we did and how we did it. And you talked about in the very beginning of this interview, it's time. That, like, I get chills when I think about that. The amount of time that we spent as a family, not only in Barcelona, but in all the adventures and trips that we did and all the struggles that we had through that was so rich and so different. It completely changed the course of my children's life and who they are and how they think about travel and how they think about doing things that are uncomfortable. And you get 80% of your time with your kids is before they're 18. And so this trip really enriched that. And now the way we transformed, since we've been back, we take adventures every year now. Things that are not easy, things that are a bit challenging, things that we all grow from. And that is what slows down times, creates core memories. And hopefully when your kids are older in life and they're talking about their childhood, right? This is some of the things that they're going to talk about and how it was impactful for them.
I think that's wonderful. I think many of us, you kind of do the thing, you go to work, you do the hours, you struggle, keep doing it, rinse and repeat. Yeah. And the kind of the kind of mindfulness and thoughtfulness that you brought to it with actually like writing it down and talking to each other as a family and coming up with a vision and then experiencing that together. Yeah, it's very, very rare. But I think if more people did it, we'd feel a lot closer to each other.
Look, the book is called 3 Big Questions for a Frantic Family. It's written by Patrick Lencioni, who also wrote the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I have gotten more value and return of investments from books that cost $15 than any coaches, any courses, any conversations. And so I just read a lot and I experiment with different things. And I just want to repeat something here. Like, even when I was introduced to David Rich, who moved in Barcelona, and somebody said all this, I was very clear with him. I'm like, thank you for sharing this with me. I don't want to waste your time because this is like a pipe dream for us. Like, this is enjoyable. Like, I talked to him dozens of times for over 4 years. I just was like, I just wanted to hear about it. And then when we ended up moving, I just want to reiterate, it wasn't one big decision. It was a lot of small steps, like applying to the school. You can get in the school and still not go. Right. Start applying for a visa. And then one of the things psychologically that helped, we told my parents that we were moving before we made the decision to move. We told our friends that we were moving before we fully decided we were going to move. I don't know. I do that a lot, to be honest. And my wife doesn't, but I just felt like you tell enough people, you sort of got to do it. But you're also getting feedback. Like if my parents were devastated or whatever, but we didn't say, oh, we're thinking about it. What do you think? We're like, no, we've done it. And then eventually you tell enough people, then the next thing you know, you're putting a deposit on an apartment and you're on a plane to Barcelona with 11 suitcases. And you're like, okay, I guess we're doing this.
Well, you'd mentioned, I was showing off the fast forward mindset right here, everybody.
Yeah.
Which was kind of the prequel. And that you had mentioned how that kind of mindset, I guess, kind of led to this. Like how so?
Yeah. Okay. So the fast forward mindset, there's a lot of books about how to get out of your comfort zone, but there's less books about once you take action, which many entrepreneurs, that's what we do. We get out. So often we fall back into it. Cause we're like, oh my God, what did I do? And you're like, you just go back to where you were. And so the framework was, okay, once you get out of your comfort zone. What are steps that you can do to actually stay out longer and then finally find the focus to move forward? And so when we were thinking about moving to Barcelona, I was like, okay, let's use the fast forward. Let's use the framework. Like, okay, let's take action. Let's tell people that we're going. Let's start applying to schools. Let's do all these things. And then it was like, okay, it's called nip fear in the bud is step 2. How do you prevent yourself from using fear to fall back? And there's like techniques, right? Like journaling, great gratitude, different things that we were doing that I didn't like. I was just like, there's fear and doubt that always wanted to push me back. And we constantly had to keep moving forward there. But this most specific thing is to finding focus. We set a date. We said we have to make a decision by this date. And because you got to make it, you got to pay for school. You got to put a deposit down.
Yeah.
And so by having that date with the deposit and the school and the reasons why, it allowed us to move forward. So like all those things together and using sort of like the worksheets, it was just fun to work through. And most importantly, it's like there's a sheet. It's like, what do you want to do? And what is the mindset holding you back from wanting to do that? Like all stuff that you see all these different places, except in 2019, I intimately made it. So I believed in it and I did it. And I think that was the difference when you just find something random that's out there. And I just wanted to like eat my own dog food and see like, does this actually help you? Could this help me in my life? And I don't know, maybe I pulled it along, but the answer was, yeah, this is the scariest thing that we can do. The other thing I used it for is running a marathon. It was the scariest thing I think I could do. And I did. So those were some of the things. And ultimately, when you write a book, the average book sells 216 copies. That's 95, 8% of books, and usually family and friends. And so I knew that going into it. And of course, my goal was for it to be a bestseller and sell millions of copies, which by the way, 11 Suitcases is a bestseller on Amazon. So that's awesome. But it was written for me first, because they say you write the book you were meant to read. It's a famous quote. And so that's how I felt about it.
Well, let me ask you a couple questions with the time we have left. Like one of them is clearly you have a lot of things that you're working on, like a lot of interests, and it keeps life interesting. And I'm curious, especially for the benefit of the audience, how do you, and I think you may have already answered it through everything that you said, but how do you keep it balanced? How do you keep work and life balanced, or is there no such thing?
The number one thing that has been important to me since the beginning of since law school, is time. I've always realized time is being able to control my time was what I knew was success. And in law school, I went to some internships and I was treated horribly by by the boss. And I said, I'm never going to put myself in that experience again. So work-life balance it's not only important to me, it's the entire essence of the core values of Lawline. We have 4-day work weeks. We have a large vacation schedule. We go on retreats that allow you to experience. You can go with your family members before. We do so many things that are focused on your family first and Lawline second, because that is what's most important. That's when I talk about my legacy, very little is about Lawline. It's more about your family. And so I moved to Barcelona and spent all this time with my family. We're now a remote company. We all have much more freedom in most businesses to spend time with your family and less guilt about it because you're not like taking off work. So I do think it's an important thing. I don't think everybody has it. And I recognize when you're in a startup mode, it's harder to do.
Yeah.
And it's probably, I love public speaking. I am going to accelerate that this year, but I probably would say, because my twins are going to college, so it's just going to be one kid left out of 3. One of the reasons I hadn't pursued it, because I know you have to travel a lot when you speak. You're away. And so I do not like traveling much. So it is the number one thing that I focus on. And I feel pretty good about it.
Well, that leads me to the last question, because the things that we do are for some purpose. And I'm curious at the end of the day, what makes it meaningful for you?
My personal mission even though it's broad, it's what I can easily repeat all the time. It's to inspire and empower people to live their life to their fullest so they can look back and have no regrets. I read this book called Arete, fantastic book by Brian Johnson. And what Arete essentially means, it's like the journey of your life is constantly trying to go from here to there, like to live that to your fullest life. And that's what energizes me and excites me. And so being comfortable and being happy are not the same thing. And I've recognized that. And to some degree, maybe to a detriment. So I'm always looking to figure out how to move that journey, which I'll never get to that point, to reach, to be my fullest and to have the biggest impact. And I do that by leading in front of my kids so they can see that. Like I had a book launch party this week. They were in the front row. And then at the very end, we had them come up and answer questions because I wanted them to do, like, it was their story too. And it's not just about me. So I wanted them not only to see me, but I wanted them to be in their own light. They're also like, they're the leaders of this Blood Cancer United. They're raising money for blood cancer research. My mom died a year and a half ago and they're doing it in her honor. And so that to me are the things that make it worth it, and seeing them and just recognizing what's important in life.
Sorry about your mom, but that's a wonderful way to
thank you. I have 3 pictures of her right here. I talked about her, and I wrote the book. And the dedication in the beginning of the book is to her. I'll end on this because I know we're at the end, but like I tried to write this book a dozen times, I swear, and I kept stopping because I couldn't. Every time I finished, it was like a travel log, and that's not interesting. Then my mom died. She was really integral. She was my biggest cheerleader, especially with my first book. And she visited us while we were in Barcelona with my dad. And it was a miracle that she was able to do that. And so I dedicated the book to her because I decided when she passed away, I was going to finish the book in her honor. It still took a year and a half from there because it made me feel closer to her. So that's ultimately what pushed me past the finish line. So, and that's why I get to talk about her all the time now.
Well, that's beautiful. And it's always a great thing to talk about the people we love.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, David, for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom, for allowing me to share my story and share what's been impactful for me in my life.
So for everyone who's been watching and they want to keep in touch with you, maybe they want to get a copy of Love in Suitcases, how can they do that?
So the easiest way, just go to 11suitcases.com. You can put the number 11 or do the word 11 suitcases. Not only will that bring you to a site with other things, there's just a button on there that says buy book, and that will take you to Amazon. It's much easier than going to Amazon and typing it off. I unfortunately didn't think about the title when I wrote it. When you go to Amazon and you write 11 suitcases, you can get a lot of suitcase ads.
I would imagine, yeah. Well, everyone out there, if you want to continue this conversation with David, read his book, check that out, 11suitcases.com. I know that I will be visiting that right now. So
awesome. Thank you.
Thanks again, David.
Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.